Welcome to episode number 4 of Beyond Medicine, Natural Health Empowerment. I'm your host, Bruce Britton, and on today's podcast, we'll explore the biggest roadblock to good health, the main overriding problem, malnutrition. In the United States? Yes, you heard right. Malnutrition. Let's find out today on Beyond Medicine, Natural Health Empowerment. We've been talking about the way big business and big medicine deal with things and the differences in the way that you deal with things and other doctors that are looking at natural approach to health. Let's talk a little bit about the successes you have had and some of the diseases that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis.
Well, I think probably the number one disease I deal with at some level is malnutrition. We just don't get the nutrition we need in the foods that we're eating. That's sort of underlying almost all the diseases that I see. The body wants to repair. It wants to heal. If you give the cells the nutrition they need, they'll perform the way they're designed to perform and those functions. And so I like to make people aware that that's the first thing they can do for whatever problem they come to me with, whether it's depression. Diabetes certainly is very curable, especially adult type diabetes, and heart disease. We do a lot of reversing of the atherosclerosis here, and it's not that hard to do. Diet is a huge factor, and it's foundational to that. But we use things like EDTA, which is a chelator, pulls the calcium out of the coronary arteries, and you can prove that. It doesn't show up in the traditional medical journals as very favorable, but we've already talked about the reason for that, and that's why we're trying to get this out here so people can know that there are methods that are valid, that are very effective, and cost very little money, and that's their biggest problem. If they cost a lot of money, everybody would know about it. But this is an inexpensive way. This is low tech, and frankly, it's much more powerful than the more expensive methods that are out there. Okay. Nutrition. Everybody's heard about nutrition. Everybody's got ideas about it. They think this food is more nutritional than that. Whole grains are more nutritious than refined grains, but that's not necessarily true. For example, refined grains whole grains have a problem, refined grains don't. So it's very confusing. And again, all this data is coming through industry. So where do you go? How do you find out what is really good for you? And I think that's been figured out. And the question is, what are humans designed to eat? Cows eat grass, okay? You give them grass, you give her grass, she's going to live 20 to 25 years, pretty much disease-free, having her babies, no trouble, okay? You start giving her grains, you're going to lower her life expectancy down to 3, maybe 4 years, and she won't even live that long unless you're giving her antibiotics to beat down the liver abscesses, okay? You're making her sick, obese, effectively diabetic, and then we eat them. Okay, so what are humans designed to eat? How do you figure that out? If you study the populations around the world today, you're not going to figure it out because everybody's eating wrong, except for one group. One group of people on the entire planet are eating correctly. And who are they? Hunter-gatherers. Those few people that are still living in the woods, gathering and hunting their food. That's what we've done for thousands and thousands of years, estimated about 600,000 years. How the Industrial Revolution is about 300 years old. Grains entered the diet about 10,000 years ago in the Middle East, and there was the first problem. We started growing our own food. Chronic diseases began in human beings. The archaeologic record is crystal clear on this. There's really not much debate about it. Whenever grains are introduced into the diet, and they're done so not because it's a better lifestyle, because it's not. The average hunter-gatherer workday is 2.5 hours. The early agrarian farmer workday was about 10 hours a day. Life expectancy is cut in half when grains are added to the diet. Chronic diseases begin, such as osteoporosis, virtually absent from the archaeologic record. Rheumatoid arthritis, an autoimmune disease. Virtually absent and shows up very powerfully, very well in high amounts, very commonly when grains are added to the diet. Then you've got the fact that infant mortality goes way up when grains are added to the diet compared to our hunter-gatherers. Civilization, as we call it, reduced our life expectancy. Only until more recent years we've come up with some methods to help counteract that. People say, oh, hunter-gatherers only live to be about 40 years old. That's true, but they're not old at 40. That's just because that's the average. They live to be 60, 70, and 80 years old. In the Venezuelan jungle, for example, there's a group down there. The young men typically have more than one wife in their lifetime because they get married the first time when they're 13 or 14, and their first wife is usually about 60 years old. Now, what does that tell you about the health of a 60-year-old hunter-gatherer woman? Okay, it tells you an awful lot. So our perception of hunter-gatherers is not really very good. It's not correct. Hollywood has made them sort of these huddling, shriveling, shivering masses, you know, of people that are just barely eking out a living. But when you realize their average workday is 2.5 hours, they're sort of born retired. They don't get allergies, asthma, irritable bowel, ulcerative colitis, diabetes virtually unknown. They don't get heart disease. Their average cholesterol is 120. The entire range is between 110 and 140. Okay, they have less than 100th amount of breast cancer compared to modern American women. So when you study these hunter-gatherers, and there's not such a thing as a hunter-gatherer diet, because you may be at the equator, you may be towards the poles, that's obviously going to vary, but the principles that they all live by are virtually the same, and that simply is this. Obviously they're eating wild foods. Now that's a whole nother topic, and I really it's fascinating about the difference in wild versus even organic. There's a huge difference in the nutritional value of those two. But they don't eat grains, they don't eat beans, they don't eat potatoes, and they don't eat dairy after 2 years old. You can't milk a wild animal. Domestication hadn't happened yet for them. And so, what do they eat? They eat vegetables, fruits, nuts, and a lot of wild animal. On average, if you look at around the world, the hunter-gatherers eat about 70% animal. 70% of their calories come from animal, 30% from fruits, nuts, and vegetables. Now, that's a lot more now than what the average American or people in civilized world, if you will, do eat. It gets as low as 45% was the least amount of animal ever found in a hunter-gatherer diet. There certainly were no vegetarians. That's an aberration. The shortest life expectancy on Earth is southern India, where they're all vegetarians. Northern India, they eat meat and they live considerably longer. The problem with our meat today is that it's been altered. It's not free-range cattle. It's not free-range chickens or their eggs. It's grain-fed. And grains aren't food for anything on the planet. Isn't that interesting? People think it's just this wonderful... But grains are starvation food. It's secondary food. Grains don't want to be eaten. Okay, I know that sounds funny. But if grains were good food, then all the animals would eat it readily and it would go extinct because they're eating the seed itself. Okay? The same with beans and the same with potatoes. That's why those plants put toxins in the seeds and the beans and the potatoes there so the animals don't eat it. Now we've learned to heat them up so that you get rid of most of those toxins, but they're still not designed to be food for the animals.
Now, we do all sorts of things to make them edible.
Yeah, if you had a bowl here of raw beans chopped up, raw potatoes and raw grains all chopped up, that wouldn't look like food. It wouldn't smell like food. It wouldn't taste like food. And if you ate enough of it, it'd kill you. That's not food, okay? Now, vegetables want to be eaten. Fruits and berries want to be eaten. Why? Because the animals eat them, and then 10 miles down the road deposits those seeds in a pile of fertilizer. That's the propagation strategy of those foods. And they've learned over the years to supply the animals with what the animals need to survive, because they count on them. Even in a drought, they actually produce things. The plants, under that stress condition of the drought, produce molecules that actually help the animals deal with the drought.
You have a statement where you say a disease doesn't just happen.
Right, exactly. If you were on a remote island somewhere, I kind of use this example, and you're peering through the trees and you see in a clearing there a wild animal, the one thing you really would expect that animal to be is healthy. If it had some sort of chronic disease, you would say, I'm out of here. I don't know what the deal is. This is an evil place. I'm leaving, okay? Because that's very abnormal. And that's because that animal's eating the foods it's designed to eat. You know, I like to ask people, have you ever seen a wild animal overweight? Well, no. And the reason is because they're eating the foods they're designed to eat. And when people eat the foods they're designed to eat, they don't get the diseases that we see.
You've been watching Beyond Medicine, Natural Health Empowerment. If you would like more information, contact the Sebring Clinic at 512-847-5618 or visit us on the web at sebringclinic.com.